everyone. Thank you so much for jumping in and listening to our recording. We thought we'd create a recorded version of what would have been a financial wellness webinar. And today we're talking to Triya Govender, who is the Head of Marketing and Client Experience at FloatPays. FloatPays is an earned wage access provider that specializes in financial wellness and employee benefits. Now, coming out of the conference, one thing was evident for us, and that is that as organizations, we focus on employee well-being and wellness, and oftentimes we miss the all-important aspect of financial wellness and financial education for our employees. And because we service a very wide variety of people from different backgrounds and different levels of education, we can't always assume that our employees know about budgeting and good personal financial management. They also end up getting into financial trouble, and they look for risky ways in which to solve it, such as loan sharks, etc. Now, to set the scene, Triya, and I think to get us started on this, could you unpack for us the impact of being financially unwell on both the employee and the employer?
Sure. And just to start off, thank you to yourself and BPESA for the opportunity to talk to your members. I think it's a very important subject that we're touching on, especially as we head into the festive season. And I think what comes afterwards is even worse with January. So the impact of a financially unwell workforce, or to be financially unwell yourself, there's both detrimental effects on an employer and an employee. I don't think anyone can deny that we're living in some of the most stressful times they have been in recent years. And I think financial stress is endemic. It is, a chronic type of stress. And I think people increasingly have become more stressed around money in the last year, with things like interest rates going up and just the cost of living rising. And inevitably, what that leads to is a direct impact on people's general mental well-being. So, when your mind is always on money, it takes away your focus from other aspects of your life or your daily job. It has a very real impact on your physical health. So you tend to find people get sick more often, they can't recover as fast. So very real impact, both physically and mentally, on individuals. And how does that play out for employers? Well, what we've seen, and FloatPays conducted research earlier this year into the state of employee well-being in South Africa. And I'll just share some of the findings from that research. The first being, the top 5 causes of financial stress for the sample of employees that we interviewed. 58% of our respondents called out transport or fuel, petrol, as a big driver of financial stress. 54% referencing household expenses as a top driver of financial stress. 47% calling out food. I mean, that's a basic necessity in one's lives, and to have that at 47% was quite scary to see. 46% referencing rent as a cause of financial stress, and 35% talking about black tax. And I'm sure I don't need to explain to our audience the concept of black tax, but that coming up as quite a big factor in terms of a driver of financial stress. So the reasons for people's financial stress tend to be everyday life things. And of course that, has the effects that I've just spoken about on the individual. For the employer, how this manifests, it shows up as things like increased absenteeism rates, less presenteeism. So I'm at work, I'm at my desk, or I'm on the contact center floor, but I'm not quite there. I'm not focusing on the work at hand. So high absenteeism, low presenteeism. We also see that there's a net impact on their productivity. Right, so there tends to be a slump in productivity levels, and of course that has a direct impact then on an employer's bottom line. So all round, just quite a negative picture for both employer and employee. But of course there are things that can be done to help solve for financial stress and get people into a better position financially and drive financial wellness.
Just struggling to get off mute. Thank you so much, Priya. Very interesting research that you've done, and maybe what we can do is unpack that research in another session with you, where we can share with our BPESA universe some of the data that surrounds financial well-being and financial fitness for employees. And then you mentioned something interesting, the high absenteeism. When you couple that with low presenteeism, all it does is it increases the risk to the business, because where somebody would have taken 100 calls in a day or would have made successful sales on that day, you're almost burning through, in a sales environment, you'll be burning through your leads because that person's not present, they're not making the sales, or they're causing complaints by being there and by answering those particular calls. So it's a double whammy, because both your attrition is hit and your service and the quality of your service is compromised.
Quality is a good point, right? So at the conference, you know, a lot of the speakers referenced what the secret sauce, or what makes South Africa this unique destination for business processing outsourcing. And it's the people, and it's the way we deliver the service, and it's, you know, it's the character that we bring across in the calls, it's the empathy that we bring across in the calls. And if you're now in a position where, you know, you're worrying about where, you know, your next bus ticket or train ticket or taxi fare is coming from, or actually, you know, how you're going to, you know, make the next meal, you're not really going to be delivering, you know, this exceptional client experience on behalf of your customers. So yeah, I think, you know, in that sense as well, the quality of work definitely dips.
Yeah, and this is why it makes sense for us to actually take care of the employee, because the more present they are and the more able they are to focus during the day, the better it is for our clients. And yeah, very interesting points. Now, for employers wanting to develop or enhance the financial wellness benefits for employees, or to even implement it, right? What are some of the key things that they should focus on? So what sort of help should they be looking to in order to provide for their employees?
Sure. So I'm going to not speak to salary, because, you know, I don't think that's you know, that there's many factors that influence, you know, pay brackets and what people are remunerated. So I'm not going to speak to that. I'm going to speak to the other things, the other dimensions of financial wellness that employers could focus on. So again, in referencing the research FloatPays did earlier this year, debt comes out as a big driver of financial stress. In fact, the SARB published, you know, stats earlier this year that talked about, you know, people spending up to 3/4 of their take-home pay servicing debt. And it's not, you know, mortgages or, you know, car financing necessarily that they're paying back. It tends to be what I dub as easy credit. So, you know, it's the store credit cards, the personal loans. And then that's on the formal side. You have to also consider the informal side of lending, the mashanisas or the payday lenders or loan sharks that don't get accounted for in these stats necessarily. So a large portion of people's pay is going towards debt. And I think if employers can look at solutions that help people understand how to, you know, work out of debt or not get themselves into debt, and give them alternatives to credit, or to having to turn to credit, is a good intervention. I mean, in our business, earned wage access is very much that. It is about giving employees an alternative to a credit card or a loan shark, by giving them early access to, or on-demand access to their earned wages, wages that they've technically already worked for. Not necessarily a traditional salary advance. So I think debt and focusing on interventions that can help people stay out of debt or improve their credit and debt position is really important. And then very, very important, I think, is also, you know, focusing on the education element, really helping staff understand basic financial management principles. You know, in our business, it's not surprising, but it never ceases to shock me. You know, just some basic principles that people don't understand. And this is people from all walks of life. You know, things like understanding the concept of a credit score. How is a credit score actually developed? What are the things that get you a good credit score? What are the things that worsen your credit score? How does a credit score actually impact your access to finance? You know, later in life, when you want to buy a home or you want to finance a vehicle, like your credit score, all those lovely, you know, the Truworths cards and the lovely store credit cards that you might be going to town with when you're younger and maybe aren't thinking about those financial responsibilities, come back to bite you later. So simple concepts like credit score, understanding the concept of credit itself, you know, what is an unsecured loan versus a secured loan, the concept of interest. So all of those things, basic financial management principles, and focusing the content on those and the education around those, I think will, you know, do employees a world of good. And it really is where employers should be looking to. So I think debt and solutions around, you know, keeping people out of debt and giving them alternatives to credit, and then education would be two areas that I think employers would do well to focus on.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. What about savings? Like, you know, we're getting into a Christmas period, and all you ever have each month is your salary, right? But with Christmas and with the holidays around the corner, particularly if people haven't saved, what are some of the things that they can do to still spoil themselves now? And how can they avoid that January that you spoke about and start off the new year financially stress-free? And then I think a second part to that question is, what can they do from January to prepare themselves better for next year, December?
Absolutely. I think you touch on a very, very important point. Savings is also critical to financial wellness. And actually, to answer the earlier question on what employers could do, I think trying to foster or make savings easy for their staff is another intervention that I think is really, really important. We at FloatPays believe, or we're focused on moving people from debt to savings, because if your entire paycheck is being basically taken by paying back credits, there's very little to then still save and live on. And so, you know, that component of debt and helping people, you know, reduce their reliance on debt really feeds into how you can actually get your staff into a savings position or into a better position to save. You know, savings, you hear these comments that South Africans don't save. And yeah, you know, sure, in part that is true. But I also think that historically, South Africans have saved in different ways. I mean, stokvels have been around for many, many years, you know, and you know, more recently, formalized financial institutions have, you know, really started catering for the stokvel mechanism. But so I think savings is something that is being done, maybe not in the formalized way, but it would be good to for employers and employees to think about, okay, if I'm saving, am I saving it in a vehicle that's going to earn me interest? So not only am I saving, but is my money also able to grow in whatever saving scheme that I'm saving towards or saving into? At FloatPays, we have something called a paycheck-linked savings account, which basically takes the think work out of savings. So one of the biggest barriers to savings is the discipline, right? So you get your salary into your account. There's many things that can eat into that money very quickly. And then savings is an afterthought. But if your savings contribution is coming off your net pay, off your paycheck before it hits your bank account, that's one way to drive a savings discipline. And that's how we've designed our savings product, for example. We also offer currently an interest rate of 5.2% per annum. And, you know, when thinking about saving as an employee or even as an employer, that's where you need to focus on. Focus on things that are going to really help you be disciplined in savings, and, you know, vehicles that are going to help you grow that savings contribution through the year. And start saving early. I think it's probably not a new thing that I'm saying here. Definitely isn't a new thing that I'm saying here, but start saving at the beginning of the year. If you plan ahead, this time next year or January next year won't be January. So, you know, in order to get into a position where you can still enjoy the festive season and don't feel like you have to compromise and now I must be on a budget and I can't have all the nice things that I want. If you still want to have, you know, a good December, but not be in a position where then you can't afford school fees in Jan or buy uniforms in Jan or, you know, get to work in Jan, then planning ahead, it will take planning ahead. And, you know, if you start saving early and you're disciplined about contributing something each month into a savings account that will accrue interest, then that's a good way to set yourself up for, you know, a better festive season. I think if you're in a position where maybe you haven't saved this year and you want to avoid January, the best thing to do is be very strict with the budget that you do have. I mean, December and January come around every year. It's not like we don't know what to expect. It's not like we don't know that we're going to be making trifle and everything else for the Christmas table. Those things that we know what we tend to spend. And I think the discipline around just sticking to a budget is really important. And I guess in the contact center environment, probably, you know, a younger workforce, maybe that many of them don't have kids, but let's say you do have kids. One tip that I always say is don't take your kids shopping when you go and do your Christmas shopping. You will be so surprised at how much that actually causes people to break their budgets because of pester power. So it's simple things like that around just really being disciplined with how much you're expecting to spend, what you're going to spend it on. And when you account for your budget, don't just account for December. You want to account for the things that are coming in Jan. And look for opportunities where you can bring forward your debit orders. So, for example, Discovery has done something really great this year where they're offering their customers the opportunity to bring forward their debit orders. Because what happens, right? We get paid early in December and then we run out of money well in advance, but there's debit orders that are going off at the end of the month, at the beginning of Jan. So look for where you've got debit orders going off. If there's an opportunity to also bring forward your debit orders closer to the date of your payday, so that you don't fall into that trap of overspending ahead of time. So those are just some tips to think about, you know, still having a good December and avoiding January. And I think it goes to as much for employees as it does for employers and how they can support their staff in doing some of this.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I absolutely loved that whole concept of the stokvel and things like that. This year, funnily enough, was the first year that I attempted and joined a stokvel that we had in the area. And it was such a relief at the beginning of this month where everything dropped off at the house. And I was like, oh, I don't have to go shopping. Because what generally happens is you do spend a lot of and technically your November salary should be carrying you through to the end of December, right? And your December salary should be carrying you for January. But what often happens is that we get our December salary and we spend it on things that are needed in December without thinking about the whole, I think, 120 days that January has, because it is an exceptionally long month.
And that's the thing, when you think about, when you do your budget, what tends to happen is you just budgeting for December, but actually that's incorrect. You do need to budget across all the way through to Jan. Otherwise you will find yourself in trouble, most probably. But again, as employers, so, you know, the employers can also look at ways in which to help people, you know, bridge that inevitably long month and inevitably tough month financially for people, right? And I think products, what we traditionally see in our business at FloatPays is that in Jan, earned wage access becomes a bit of a safety net or a life jacket for people. And you don't see the overspend. What you tend to find is people are spending that on transport because I'm stuck wherever I'm stuck, if I've gone to for the holidays and I now need to get back to the place I work. Or you see them spending it on you know, based on the withdrawal amounts, you tend to see that it's like a stopgap for groceries and things like that, right? So, yeah, I think employers can look for interventions like that, because if that, in the absence of having that, where do people turn? They inevitably turn to the loan shark, you know, to the payday lender, or whip out the credit card. And all that does is it sets you up to go deeper into debt. And so it's sort of that vicious cycle.
Yeah, and we repeat that vicious cycle, unfortunately, because you're starting the year off on a bad foot. So I think there were two things that really got me was the data that you keep in terms of what people are spending on. I think that's exceptional, because if I'm spending it on petrol, I actually care about my job. So January, where as a sector, we would see high attrition rates of people leaving, or people just not coming to work because they don't have that. So high percentages of sick leave that get taken over that period.
100%.
Or in areas where they are honest with their managers is to say, listen, I don't have petrol to come to work. There's nothing I can do.
And our research showed us that the number one cause of financial stress for the sample that we researched, 58% of them called out petrol and fuel or transport as the driver of stress. Right?
And with the increases that we've had this year in fuel, I mean, it's not surprising. It really isn't surprising that is the number one. And it would have only gotten worse throughout the year if your research was done quite early on in the year, right? So really, as a call out, I think employers need to be looking at ways in which we can support the employees through, I think, firstly, education, making sure that we're not spoon feeding you and we're not giving you a solution to a problem that you're going to keep having, but educating and then finding stopgaps and finding solutions to help them ease through this particular period. Priya, how would someone get hold of you? Would they need to contact you? Is there a website? Is there an email address?
Yeah. So we also on the BPESA, part of the BPESA network. So you can also reach us via BPESA's channels. But our website is www.floatpays.com. And that's the easiest way to reach us. Or you can find us on LinkedIn. Our handle is also FloatPays. So that's FLOATPAYS, FloatPays.
Awesome. Triya, thank you so much. It was really awesome chatting to you. I am looking forward to deep diving on that research and looking for which we can just highlight some of those throughout the year to keep financial wellness top of mind for everybody. And I think to the rest of our BPESA guys that are listening to the recording, I think essential is that as BPESA, we will look for ways in which to bring some of this education to the fore, so that it makes it easier for you to educate your staff. But there are organizations like FloatPays that do this and do it really well. So Triya, again, thank you so much. I look forward to working with you for the rest of the year and 2023. in making sure that we can create a workforce that is just financially fit. I think that should be one of our goals for 2023 is financial fitness before losing a bit of the plumpy cheeks.
Yeah. That's not what January is about. Thank you so much for having us, Shona, and to all of the listeners as well. Have a wonderful festive season.
Thank you so much, Triya. Cheers, everyone.
Bye.